So we're back. We're talking your New York Knickerbockers, a team that doesn't just represent New York City. The Knicks, unlike the Nets, are New York State's team. And if they represent so many people and so many people who care about this team, follow this man, my man CP, who's on the line with me. We're talking the team, man, and when we were over, you just gave us a history of all of the things that have happened that has got us here. Where are we? Define for the audience, where do the Knicks stand right now, and what's the opportunity for them?
So right now we're in the middle of a proper full rebuild, right? I think if you take a look at it from a macro view, last year they went into the draft, they pulled out Knciks, who it still seems like somewhat of a project. The verdict is still out on him. They hit the lottery with Mitchell Robinson, obviously a second-round pick who many teams have passed over, but certainly one of the more up-and-coming impact players in the league. And then they were able to sign Alonzo Trier, who's an undrafted free agent. This year they came in, they got R.J. Barrett with the third pick of the draft. Obviously, R.J.'s coming on strong. He's right up there in the Rookie of the Year standings. And then in the second round, they were able to pick up Ignaz Brazdeikis. So I think right now we're in the process of a rebuild. We had the cap space last summer to try to make a splash. As you know, well, as a Nets fan, well. But listen, we lost. We lost out on the big targets. KD, Kyrie, Kawhi Leonard, you name it. We lost out. And so we had to take that money and try to pair these young guys up with some solid veteran talent. And it just doesn't seem like the guys that we got right now are really contributing to making this team better. Now, David Fizdale has been on the hot seat in that regard to our slow start, which we kind of expected.
Yeah.
But, a lot of these guys, the Julius Randles of the world, Marcus Morris, individually they're pretty good talents, but collectively it's yet to be seen whether or not this team can really gel. Because theoretically, you have a lot of these guys on 1-year deals.
So let me jump in. Let me jump in there. I that's something that I wanted to bring up, and the most puzzling part of what they're doing right now is the guys that they signed. Right, they're not pieces of the future because they're only on 1- and 2-year deals, and actually they're really 1-year deals with an option, and
right.
And those, and like for me, I don't know if it's better for the Knicks that they lose, right? If they're going to lose, that they lose doing it with Kevin Knox getting beat up, but getting better for 36 minutes. I don't know if it's better that they lose with, Taj Gibson having a 15-point night, or Mitchell Robinson learning to just discipline himself so that he could play big minutes and that he could be trusted at the end of games. I just don't see the value of putting those guys even for 1 year in front of those kids. What would you say to that?
Yeah. Well, I would say for one, they had so much cap space that they had to meet a certain threshold in terms of how much they had to spend. So they had to spend the money anyway, right? They went out, they got a guy with, let's say, I still believe Julius Randle still has upside. He's 24 years old, coming off of his best season of the year with the Pelicans, and I still think there's room for him to grow. Obviously, as the number one option on this team, his flaws have been really magnified because he has to be the number one guy. So he's getting all the attention, he's drawing all the double teams, and he doesn't look good. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
But I think, there's a fine balance between winning and development, and what's the proper way to develop these kids? Is it going to be sitting behind, all these veterans, or is it going to be having them be more of, in the forefront and with the veterans being more of a supporting role? To me, I've said this quite a few times. As the owner of a team and you go into free agency and your president and your GM are selling you on a path forward, on a plan forward, you're going to want to see the guys that you just signed. You're going to want to see them live in the minutes. I think that's just natural for a time, right? And then there's going to come a point in time where they're going to have to figure out, okay, at what point do we try to trade some of these guys? At what point do we move Kevin Knox forward and dial back Marcus Morris's minutes if he's still here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're going to have to figure it out.
I have I watch every minute of every Knicks game all year. I'm that bought into just basically making a good analysis, and I can't stand, because I'm looking at Marcus Morris and he's just one of those hungry dudes. Like, you could just see it that he's playing for his next contract. And just from the way he handled free agency with the Spurs and all that, I just know he's a go for self type of cat. And I don't know if that's the cat that, like, I would have, like, if you don't mind, humor me and let me give you my proposal. Right? I would have, in the summer, used cap space as a weapon. The moment I didn't sign anybody, I'd be like, who needs to get cap space off their books? I'll eat that in order to for a first round pick, because I think the best thing that could ever happen to the Knicks is if they just had lots of bullets in the gun and they just shot it every time, and because they don't make bad picks. If I would say one of the things that I like about the Mills Perry regime has been some of their picks.
So far they're 2 for 2.
Right. I think I'm talking, and especially in the late round, I think the kid in the G League with the name I can't pronounce has some game potential, and obviously Mitchell Robinson is a home run. So I would rather arm those guys instead of just bringing in old players who like, I'm sorry, they're human. Basketball players are human beings. You're talking about rich, satisfied human beings. Like, I'm looking at Kyrie Evans. Like, Kyrie Irving on the Nets? Who's gonna tell Kyrie what to do? Like, when people bring up Kyrie, it's like it's such a non-conversation, because of course the superstar is gonna have sway. Melo had sway at the Garden. Darren Williams, unfortunately for us, had sway at Barclays. It's just the game, but at the same time, do you want to give that sway to Marcus Morris? Because I almost would rather see R.J. Barrett shoot 24 times and just learn what he can and can't do on a basketball court, what he needs to add to his bag, and then on top of it, just adding young players around him and just make him the de facto leader like he wants to be. So if I were the Knicks, I would have just used cap space as a weapon, just gathered up as much draft picks as I possibly could, and just, I mean, not tank my way out of it, but build a foundation of just young, pit bulls that's just running around on the court without a leash. I think that's when the Knicks are the most scary, as someone whose team has to play them. When the Knicks are just, like at the end of the games that we've played with y'all, you guys come back, because when you just start firing, when you guys just play, I think that's when you guys are the most dangerous. Why not let the kids just go through that? I don't know,
Agreed. I definitely agree. And as you said, when you bring in a bunch of guys, human nature kicks in, right? When you bring in a bunch of guys on technically one-year deals,
right?
It's hard for you to expect this team to come together. It's hard for you to expect guys to sacrifice. It's hard for you to expect guys to just, dial it back and assume a different role than what they're used to.
Right.
Financially, it's hard to fathom, and just psychologically, it's hard to fathom. But I still think at the end of the day, it was a smart move by them to do so, to continue to keep the cap flexible. you don't want to lock in Wayne Ellington to a 3 or 4 year deal or lock in any of these guys. So even
not.
Randall, you bought yourself an extra year to as kind of a tryout. How does this guy fit in with us? He's still a young guy. Can we make him better? And so on and so forth. I think, Marcus Morris. Well, let's go back to trading for the cap space. I definitely agree with that. At the same time, there were only but so many moves that were made this offseason because there were a lot of teams with cap space. The Mo Harkless deal was the one I really wanted because, number one, he's a guy that could have helped us, especially on the defensive end.
New York guy.
Again, a New York guy, St. John's product. Mm-hmm. And, again, we could have gotten we could have gotten a draft pick. We could have gotten a serviceable player and a hometown kid. That was the deal I would have looked at. And also, I think the way the Morris thing kind of shook out late, maybe they would have done some things differently had they had the opportunity to get him early in the process rather than later. It just seemed as though once they struck out on KD, they already had these guys at the negotiating table where as soon as they lost out, they basically had signed these guys the very next day.
Yeah, here's what I went on Evan Roberts' podcast and said. Mm-hmm. I had said use the cap space to trade for picks, to take back bad contracts. And then on top of it, sign D'Angelo Russell. I think D'Angelo Russell's effect on these young guys, like, first of all, he makes the game easier for the people who play around him. He's got amazing court vision. He's only 23 years old. He would have been the best point guard on the Knicks, and he's a personality where he attracts other players. D'Angelo's one of those everybody's best friend dudes in the NBA. And because he's so well liked, he could have recruited another young superstar, a la Cat Williams, a la Karl Anthony Towns, the big cat. When his deal comes up. So what do you think about maybe they could have gone after someone like D'Angelo Russell? What did you think about that in the summer, and what do you think about it now? Because some people's minds have been changed.
Oh yeah, and I'm one of them. In the summer, I was foolish enough to say, well, why pay D'Lo all that money when you could continue to develop Dennis Smith Jr. and Frank Ntilikina? And obviously, I think Frank can still be a positive impact player, a winning player on this team down the road. Yeah. DSJ, I'm just not so sure because I'm not sure whether it's a physical setback, a mental setback, but he's really struggling this year. And conversely, D'Angelo, give credit to him. He's really grown up, after that Lakers fiasco with the recording players in the locker room and Magic shipped him out quickly. Comes to Brooklyn, has a resurgence on a Kenny Atkinson, and now is certainly having an all-star season with the Warriors, man. So D'Angelo's definitely lighting up. He definitely could have been a great pairing with RJ. But, looking forward to the draft where you have a lot of point guard prospects. You have LaMelo Ball. You have, a combo guard in Anthony Edwards. You have Cole Anthony. You have a lot of point guard. Nico Mannion.
I feel like you guys can't mix. You guys can't miss this year. Like you could only mess it up with the talent that I'm seeing. Like they slept on this draft. This draft at the top, and watch the damn Golden State Warriors are going to win the draft.
Win it. They cannot win it, man.
Wouldn't that be like the most evil thing that could ever happen? Is the Golden State Warriors win this draft?
I would not be surprised, man. The Warriors right now are executing the perfect tank season, development tank, and they're gonna pull off a heist in this draft. They got Steph on ice. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure he could come back from that hand injury. They got Clay on ice right now. D'Angelo's doing his thing. You have the kid out of Villanova that's been playing very well for them. Yeah. And I just would not be surprised if they win this lottery, get another stud, and get ready to roll for the 2020 season.
Life's not